I think it's still super, super important to think about traditional media and what comes first or second. And every campaign's different. The influencer campaign is really important. And I find with CPGs and different things where you are going to get that earned review, or that's going to take 5 months, 6 months. You have to have that strategy. But I think on the other end, I think sometimes people dive too deep into influencers before traditional media can come in. And I think it can hurt a brand sometimes.
Elaine, we are so happy to talk to you. Thank you for joining us today.
Of course, I'm happy to be here.
So let's talk PR, also earned media. I guess that's the phrase we use, right, all the time. But it probably means something a little bit different today than it did several years ago. So what does PR mean? Like, give me a definition, or how would you describe PR today versus like even a decade ago?
Even 5 years ago, I would say, and I tell people all the time when I'm like talking at UT or different things like that, when I started Giant Noise 18 years ago, like earned media was all we did. I was like, I'm putting my stake in the ground. It's, and that earned media being like a third party endorsing, the thing that you're working on or what you're selling, if it's a product, a restaurant, or whatever that is. But now when I'm pitching new business, I'll even say, if you think earned media is going to be the only thing that gives you the ROI you want, it won't. It's not. That's not going to be it. Like, I can't hand you a stack. It can be even the New York Times, and I can hand you a stack of press, but it's not going to move the needle in the way that you need it to. Whereas I think 10, 18 years ago, it really wouldn't move the needle because it was such a big medium. Whereas now when I talk to people, clients, anybody, it's just like, you have to have the entire plan. Like, what is your social strategy? What is your marketing strategy? What is your influencer strategy? Plus, you need all of it. And kind of like each project's unique and how you roll everything out is unique and it all matters. I still think earned media is so important, but if you don't have all of it, you just won't be successful. It won't reach everyone. A 20-year-old is not ever looking at the same thing as a 50, 60-year-old, and you have to account for that. So in some ways, it's like super exciting, but also super stressful to get into the brain of a 20-year-old and what they're looking at.
So it's just so much fragmentation. I mean, that's essentially what's the reason is a shift. We all used to just watch the same TV shows and networks and read the same things, and it's just not the case anymore. So what you're saying is you got to figure out how to like thread it across like a digital dandelion once you have some content. You can't just get that content and think, well, there, did that. That's it. You got to figure out how to deploy it.
Oh, totally. Well, and this is an example that I think will horrify a lot of people. So I speak to the PR classes at UT quite a bit. And I ask the kids, it's my own little focus group, 80 kids. Who here reads a Statesman? 0. Raise their hand. And then I said, who knows who Alex Earl is? And half the people raise their hand. And I don't know if she's a big influencer. And I was just like, wow, no one reads the Statesman, the paper, our local paper. So, again, it's really fascinating. And I think you just have to really dig deep and think about when you're announcing what that audience is and how to get in front of them.
Well, if you take an example product, any kind of product, and you think about, let's just act like it's a product launched for something like a consumer packaged good or something. Yeah. It might be that, a while back you'd say, well, we need to get into the trades and we need to call this reporter and BevNet or whatever it is. How much are you thinking about things like that versus just, it seems to me, my observation is the first thing is, okay, what's the influencer strategy?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. We definitely, because we've worked with Pepsi and a lot of our liquor brands and hotels and restaurants, and we do all. And again, 5 years ago, let's take big hotel brands. We were telling them you need an influencer strategy. For some people, they were like, "Ooh, I don't know." And then again, 2 years later, they're like, "What's our influencer strategy?" So you definitely have to think about it in every case. But I think for me, what I try to stress is, what is that budget? Are you paid or not paid with influencers? But I've also, I think it's still super, super important to think about traditional media and what comes first or second. And every campaign's different. But I feel like with a CPG, we launched Let Us Grow, which is hydroponic farming. Zoe Deschanel's involved with it. And it was one of those things where while we were waiting for the reviews to come in from the New York Times and from, all the major magazines, you did have to seed this so that people were starting to see it. So the influencer campaign is really important. And I find with CPGs and different things where you are going to get that earned review, or that's going to take 5 months, 6 months. You have to have that strategy. But I think on the other end, I think sometimes people dive too deep into influencers before traditional media can come in. And I think it can hurt a brand sometimes. Like you don't want to kind of turn some people off. And I'd be curious what you all say, but it's just like there's influencers and then there's people of influence. And I think
Mm-hmm.
for me and for Giant Noise, a lot of times, and there's so much value working with everybody, but I think people of influence, artists, creators, designers, people that are just doing really interesting things, I sometimes like to kind of seed things there first. Because I
Yeah.
think you have to be really careful. Like if someone's constantly promoting something that fits in a certain category, but it doesn't fit for everybody, for every
Uh,
brand, every product.
that's a great point. So another observation here is that brands don't really own their own narrative like they used to. I mean, I feel like they can set the framework for their story but then they have to be willing to put it into the hands of others and let them get it out. So it's a bit of like a leap of faith. Have you seen that happen as well? I mean, just A, is that happening? And B, how do you mitigate the risk? Like you want to be able to shape the story, but you no longer have control of the story.
Totally. Well, and I think brands still do have control in some. I mean, and again, I think for all of us, we're all going to choose to work with people that we believe in their brand, we believe in the product, we believe in what they're doing. And I think if we didn't, then that, if we were like, ooh, I hope this is okay, that I think opens up a little bit more risk. But we do have to constantly tell clients, I mean, it's twofold. It's just, I mean, unless you're paying. And I think that is a great differentiator. If it is a paid agreement, where you are controlling, you're like, here's how many posts you're going to do, here's how many. And so there's a lot more control in that. Then I think you do have that control. Where I think it gets a little bit where there's a lot of risk is if you're gifting or sending and hoping somebody is going to like it. And if they don't, then that does, but that's the same with earned media, frankly. Like, it's just, I think for PR people, we have the thickest skin in the world because we're like, hope you like it, let's hope that you're going to give this a good review or, whatever that is. So I think, that is making that decision of paid or not paid. And again, it depends on the client and what they're willing to do. But I still think that brands have some control over who they want to be and how they want to be represented. I mean, I think there's an example in everything where it kind of goes another direction and you kind of have to decide if you want to go with that direction.
So interesting. Can you share about an influencer program that you're most proud of, as you recall, over the last few years?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, we've done, it's interesting because we almost always work with influencers and have now for probably like 5 to 7 years, or people of influence. I find like in the categories of like travel and hospitality, that's where we're really like the most successful. CPG brands, we, did a big campaign for Pepsi. The first year that we did a program with them, we were partnering with like amazing female, like a pit master and a rodeo queen and all of these different people around Texas. And we partnered with a bunch of influencers to kind of get the word out, and they're doing their campaign. And it was so positive. And it was one of those situations where the press was so positive and got what we were trying to do to highlight these change makers and people that were doing something. And then, it was a pit master from Valentina's. And then we were gifting from Valentina's, like the new product and all the things going on. And so those make me really happy when it's something where you're able to share what's going on, but also highlighting someone that's doing something really impressive in the space. Like Pepsi was able to shine a spotlight on these incredible people in Texas. And that was really satisfying, I think, for all of us. But then also like hospitality, I think when we're working with travel influencers and getting them to discover a new place or destination, and those are so tedious, a lot of these trips. We rep New Mexico Tourism and Port A and a bunch of different places. And it's just like having people discover new places that they might not, and working with, influencers to get that experience. I don't know. That to me is fun because I love to travel, and I do. Like we took our daughter to Japan this summer, and I was on TikTok where do I go? What do I do?
Yeah.
And so just also seeing the power of influencers and the power of people to get, to help you in an intimidating environment and understand that.
I want to better understand like how a marketer could dip their toe or start to go down the path of creating an influencer program. But as part of that question, I might even have you answer, what the heck is an influencer? Like, and it's interesting because you had a distinction between people of influence and influencers. So like, if there's any more clarity on that from your perspective, like what you're looking for, and especially as you're trying to kind of get a program going, like a starting point. It seems like it could be overwhelming for people.
I can totally be out. And the research part, I mean, again, I think from a PR perspective, okay, all of our job for as long as I've been doing it is researching like, who are the best reporters? Who's covering this? Who's a great freelancer? Who's going to do this? And you can take that same kind of information and think about it from an influencer standpoint. And an influencer can be self-proclaimed influencer, someone that says, I am an influencer. I post these things. I'm a guide for different things. But it can also, and then when you say a person of influence, people that will take invitations to things. If you're like, you're an amazing photographer and everyone loves you and I'm going to invite you because I'm hoping you'll post about, like, when we open hotels, I like to invite like create people that are very successful within the creative class and thinking about, like, depending on what it is, it has to be the right, hotel and all those things. But, because if you see someone that you're following because you admire them as like one of the best ceramicists or one of the best architects, and you see that they're posting from somewhere, then you're going to be like, wow, I love him and I love what he does. So I want to go there too. And that person saying something, and that's again goes back to the risk, because if it's a person of, you're just saying, I'm offering this, but you cannot, like media, you're not asking for anything in return. I think with people that is their profession, they are an influencer, like they get paid, that's how they pay their bills. When you're inviting them, there is an understanding as you're working with people. And there's something called Tagger, which is what we use, which gives you, I don't know if y'all have worked with Tagger at all, but it gives you all the data on influencers. So it's their following, their numbers, what they're doing. And again, I think for us, it's also, and for brands, you have to get the ROI. Like you have to. So one of the things like Tagger really helps, and like we're able to track, so we can tell, like, and Giant Noise is, big enough that our Slack channel can be like, did this person move the needle? Did this person not? Like we just did a restaurant opening and I frankly had never done this. And someone in my office was like, oh, we did a party where we invited traditional media and influencers. The restaurant's numbers went up on Instagram and TikTok by like 4,000 people. And so my brain hadn't even gotten to those two things. Like, oh, wait, you have these parties. Like, obviously you want ROI and you want the coverage, but it's also growing their numbers and growing their viewers. And so I think that's a win. And so when you think about it that way, so again, it's so layered. And again, where with earned media, it's like you could never pay reporters to stay. You could never host.
No.
Now that's changed though, because big magazines now will accept trips or will, accept very low media, not all, but media rates. But it's just like, so again, it's like when you are building the campaign, you have to think of every single piece of this. And we get so in the weeds where it's just like, okay, who are the influencers for this demo that we want to be? And who are like, we did this, it was an art installation and it was huge and it was a very famous artist, and the campaign, the press was amazing. It was so huge, but I think I was delusional because I was like, oh, 20 somethings will love to come out to this. And we invited influencers and we were trying to it just did not move the needle at all. But then again, how it's so many details. Once we looked at the web traffic and the ticket numbers, this was something for people that were 40 plus. And we changed the whole strategy because I was just like, this is just not something. I thought maybe it would be like
interesting
and all the things, but it just was too high price point or whatever. But yeah, for everything we're thinking about,
interesting.
Adjusting everything.
We don't work directly in PR. We work tangentially to PR, but it's a landscape that has changed so much that I find just interesting. Like when you started the business and what you're dealing with now, like I have so much appreciation for the integrity of traditional earned media and journalism and like a true perspective on something. And now it's like, it's all about the dollar bills. It's, I think we know that there's a filter you need to run things through, but I don't know. I think about that a lot. I'm not saying there's not integrity with paid influencers, but they're getting paid. And so you got to realize that. And so I think it's probably your job to figure out the ones that are in it solely just to get paid and the ones that are really going to bring some authenticity and value and brand alignment, right? That is going to be true to what the brand wants. And so there's probably a distinction there that you have to be the litmus test for. But what are some of the the watch outs, I guess, when you're entering into this? What are things that can go wrong? Maybe I'm starting to shine a light on it a little bit, but from your perspective.
I mean, I think we've had instances where we hired an influencer for a campaign for one brand. There was one, I won't name names, but then we found out they had a tattoo of the competing brand. And we only found it out after going through, like, you have to go through all their
What?
Like,
How would you have ever?
Yeah, like big brands deeply care about that kind of stuff. You cannot do that. And so, we've had instances where, and again, we'll work with people of influence for a campaign and find out you have to have the product. It was a chef, but they didn't have the product and they didn't want to have the product, but we were like super far down the line and we're like, it's just always like, there's always surprises. But I think, the one thing I do love about kind of thinking on that perspective is like with traditional media, you don't know, there is some risk, but with, when we work with a lot of different influencers, we very quickly find out if they move the needle or not, so we know as a team, like someone can say like, I have like, making sure it's not bots, making sure that their numbers really their numbers and all of those things. But also they can say something, but if we've worked with someone enough and we realize like, wait, they didn't get the return on investment with that. And so that's constantly changing. But no, I'm sure I could go on for days about things that we learn. And just for context, like what's so interesting is, I was a journalism major and then but I was always in publishing. I worked in New York for a long time in publishing. And so I was the same way. I was like, we're purists, but you also have to like meet the industry where it is and meet where they are. And, I think it's been awesome to have a 16 and an 18-year-old because I know like when they send me something because they've seen it, I'm like, whoa, that's way bigger than I thought it was going to be, and everyone's consuming things differently. But I think digital and our digital work that we do, which again, like when we come into a campaign now, if someone hires us, even if they haven't hired us to do the social media, we're like, how are we going to work with their team? What's our photography? What's our video? What are all these things that we're doing? Because to storytell now, you have to provide. I was thinking like before this interview, I was like, I would have never thought we would have an in-house photographer. But we do, because on both sides, you have to do that. And so thinking about clients were never going to ask you to do a TikTok 5 years ago. And now you have to be able to provide those and how is it genuine and what does that look like and not be too salesy and, all of those things. So, we're thinking about it outside and the inside too for brands and how we're, producing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also fast paced too. And having those resources in-house allow you to be nimble and move quickly, which is huge.
Huge. Yeah. Like we're definitely leaning into that in a major, major way because we have to, it's just like it is how the industry's totally changed. So if you don't have those capabilities, a newspaper doesn't have a photographer to send anymore. Do you need that image? And, we'll hire outside and inside, but it's just like having all of that. It's just super important.
Well, a bit of a gear shift, but I'd love to talk about ROI a bit. ROI is everything, of course, today. And what are some of the things that you are able to track that are meaningful to the C-suite and validate that brand's investment to make sure that it's down?
It's everything now. Like, again, like I think PR 10 or 15 years ago, you used to kind of get away with like, but look at my ClipBook. It's so big and times and whatever. And it was just like, what is that direct correlation? And we're lucky. We do CPGs, not a ton. A lot of our work is festivals, hotels, music venues, things like that. So a lot of these things have stays and tickets and, ways that we can immediately see what that return is. And it's really fascinating when we have awesome clients that share data with us. That is the best because sometimes we'll get something in a regional publication that has a much bigger effect than a national. Like I've had people get into Bon Appetit and then Austin Monthly and seeing which one drives the market. And again, you can't make sense of it all the time. But I think having that communication where we're watching, but we have to be able to deliver ROI or we're not successful. We just aren't. You can say like, it's so important to have brand recognition. It's so important to have all those things. But if they're not successful and they're not selling and they're not growing, then that's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said something that seems so obvious, but doesn't always happen. And that is having clients share sales data. I mean, it's like you think, right? But sometimes that you have to pull that out of them. But the more you know, the more you can adjust and pull levers in order to optimize.
And just being partners with them, because I don't
Yeah.
know if they see it. Like this one food influencer, again, on his own, posted about one of our clients and that it had the best burger in town. And I immediately was like, I need to know your sales numbers this week. After this run, after this week, I need to know what your burger, because I wanted to know, does he move the needle? Like, is this
Right.
guy, because I figured he did, and he did. And again, like those are the kind of things that are, and again, we didn't set it up, but I want to follow it and understand. And I don't think they're like, why? And I was like, because of this, and we have some clients that are super savvy in that way, where if they're on a best list by the New York Times or different things, they can tell us now what does move the needle and what doesn't, and what people are seeing, because again, everyone's consuming information in a completely different way. So that's for me where I'm constantly trying to get information from them. And when they do say, that was the biggest launch we've ever had, like everything blew up. And again, blowing up, it's true. It's if you get, my favorite is to get like launch with an exclusive earned media, have that kind of hit, and then you don't even need to invite the influencers, but they all come because they want to be on top of something that's really, and then it kind of goes from there. And then you can feel pretty good about how that start was and their numbers and being packed and all that. That's always fun.
Yeah.
I do have one last question for you, and that is just working with in-house teams on the client side, and kind of any thoughts on that in terms of what works well, what are some watch outs. But I think more and more, obviously you've got not just the in-house teams, but other partners in general. So coming from the PR standpoint, what are some things that tend to work really well? What are some things that can be watch outs?
I mean, we love when an in-house team, like if there's a PR and marketing team, like we absolutely love that. I think for us, because we work with so many different kind of brands and clients, if someone doesn't have that experience, it can be great sometimes, and sometimes it can be hard just to explain the value and why we're saying the things we're doing, or why you want to make that investment, why you want to do, boost things, or, media buys and different things like that. So to me, it's just like, I mean, again, we want to have partners. We are so lucky. We've had clients for such a long time. But I mean, I think when someone has, a marketing team that supports us and we support them and we all get each other, it's heaven. It's like, it's the absolute best. It really is.
Yeah. Well, Elaine, thank you. Enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate you hopping on to share your thoughts.
I hope it was helpful.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
That was great. It was great.